Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Museums are always fun to visit, but some of them listed here were once created for studies and research purposes that have now turned out to be impressively scary. There are even museums, where they even preserve dead bodies and have huge visitors to look at them. Weird, isn't it? A mixed list of museums here, with some of them featuring the stories of haunting and some with the awful artifacts of medieval times. Let's look at the 15 scariest museums in the world that are worth seeing once in a lifetime. The Mummy Museum in Guanajuato, Mexico. The Mummy Museum, also called Museo de las Momias, is located in Guanajuato, a UNESCO World Heritage Site where hundreds of bodies were burned in the Santa Paula Pantheon's crypts during the mid-19th century. At some point, it was discovered that the bodies had been mummified through a natural process, probably due to the climate. The corpses are now on display in the museum, and as you can imagine, it's pretty creepy. Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. If you're visiting Amsterdam, you'll probably want to make a stop at the popular Museum of Medieval Torture Instruments, also simply called the Torture Museum. The place gives you a look at the darkest history of Europe. People were regularly tortured and executed. On view are decapitation swords, Inquisition chairs, and more. You'll also learn about modern torture in today's world, which is perhaps even spookier. Museum of Death in Los Angeles, California. There are few museums scarier than one dedicated entirely to death. The Museum of Death has the world's largest collection of serial killer artwork, antique funeral ephemera, mortician and coroner's instruments, Manson family items, pet death taxidermy, crime scene photographs, and more. The Pogo the Clown shoes worn by serial killer John Wayne Gacy are on display in the museum, and they are particularly creepy to look at. Mütter Museum, Philadelphia. This medical museum in Philadelphia has walls lined up with skulls, jars filled with diseased organs, and houses the world's largest intestine. If creepy and gore is what appeals to you, they also let people get married inside the premises. Disgusting Food Museum, Sweden. The rather new museum houses exhibits that will make your stomach churn. The exhibits in the museum essentially are weird dishes from around the world, Swedish fermented herring, maggot cheese from Sardinia, and roasted guinea pig from Peru, amongst others. People who are adventurous enough can also taste or smell some of the exhibits. Catacomb dei Cappuccini, Italy. These catacombs in southern Italy are home to over 8,000 corpses and over 1,000 mummies. If you are one of those daring enough to visit, you must see the remarkably well-preserved body of Rosalia Lombardo. Dubbed the Sleeping Beauty, the body of the 2-year-old girl shows barely any signs of decomposition, even almost 100 years later. Siriraj Medical Museum, Thailand. As much a learning experience as BID is an entertaining creepiest, the Siriraj Medical Museum, also known as the Museum of Death, is an off-the-beaten path destination worth visiting when you are in Bangkok. Exhibits include photos of murder victim autopsies, mummies, and preserved deformed stillborn infants. Truly, it's a museum only for people with strong stomachs. Museum of Shadows, Nebraska. The museum is packed with over 1,000 haunted objects from around the world. People who have visited the museum have reported a variety of paranormal experiences. Dubbed as the most haunted museum in the United States, the building which houses the museum was once a saloon and a brothel. Meguro Parasitological Museum, Tokyo. The small museum houses more than 300 rare microscopic bugs, creepy crawlies, and also an 8.8-meter long tapeworm. The museum also has a souvenir shop which sells tapeworm t-shirts and parasites in acrylic, so that you never forget. Medieval Crime Museum, Germany. The Crime Museum is somewhere you probably would be more than happy to not try out the exhibits for yourself. Featuring all sorts of weapons and devices of murder and torture, one can only imagine the pain and agony those devices had inflicted. Kind of makes you think about how cruel humans can be. Warren's Occult Museum. The inspiration behind cultural phenomenon that is the Conjuring universe, the late Ed and Lorraine Warren, and their real-life paranormal cases built this museum of occult objects. Home to the notorious Annabelle doll, the objects in the room are all said to be cursed, and visitors are sternly advised not to touch anything. Glore Psychiatric Museum in St. Joseph, Missouri. The Glore Psychiatric Museum is dedicated to the 130-year history of the St. Joseph Hospital, which includes years of mental health treatment. It's located on the grounds of the original hospital and exhibits show you surgical tools, treatment equipment, nurse uniforms, artwork from former patients, and personal notes. It's certainly spooky. Bart's Pathology Museum, England. Bart's Pathology Museum is based in St. Bartholomew's Hospital at West Smithfield and houses over 5,000 medical specimens on display over 3 mezzanine levels of the Victorian Museum. Named one of CNN's 10 weirdest medical museums in the world, Bart's Pathology Museum differs from others due to its quirky, interesting events and desire to bring pathology alive. The museum, a medical humanities hub, is part of Queen Mary University of London and has been described as a modern dynamic venue for risk-taking cultural connoisseurs and London insiders. Lombroso Museum of Criminal Anthropology. Cesare Lombroso was an Italian criminologist and physician, founder of the Italian school of positivist criminology, often referred to as the father of criminology. Thus, this museum is filled with objects from his work, which makes it a terror hub. Gruesome collection of crime images, human slaughter weapons, and Lombroso's head itself, yes, preserved perfectly in a bottle of formaldehyde is what this gory museum is all about. Madame Tussauds. Yes, this place is famous for its wax statues of renowned celebrities, but it hasn't always been that way. Before it became all about the jazz, it had a history that very few know about. Madame Tussauds herself started the collection during the French Revolution. She would run up to the decapitated after people had been executed and make wax imprints of their severed heads. The most famous is probably that of the last king of France. You can still see these heads on display at the museum in the Chamber of Horror.
Part 5.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.